If you like what I do, consider supporting me on Ko-fi or Patreon. Links in the description. Gold the Jailer, huh? I wonder what deep lore you have that gave you such an interesting name. Huh. Is your lore in this cage's item description, or... Have you ever asked yourself, what if Death's Gambit, Blasphemous, Castlevania, Dark Souls, and Swords and Sorcery had a baby? Ugh, gross. Why would you ever ask that, you nasty? Let's talk about something that's not stupid, like Skelethrone. Skelethrone the Prey and Skelethrone the Chronicles of Ericona are a couple of games created by 70 Strike, which consists of a solo developer named Skelethrone. Though me introducing Skelethrone the Prey as a game is a little misleading. Prey is more of a glorified demo that sets up the main game, which is Skelethrone the Chronicles of Ericona, which is what this video is actually going to be about. What can I say? I made the thumbnail before I played either game. How was I supposed to know Prey was a demo? Oh, what? You still want me to review it? Fine. It took me 45 minutes to get through, and it was good. I award it a gold star out of 10 and place it squarely in the not an MV tier because it's not an MV. It's just a straight up Souls-like, and also a demo, so shut up. What I can say about Prey is that you should play it prior to playing Skelethrone, the Chronicles of Ericona. It's a neat prologue that sets up the world and introduces characters you'll rediscover in the main game. Plus, it's short and free, so shut up. That's enough about the demo/prologue. Let's talk about Skelethrone, the Chronicles of Ericona. You play as a skeleton.
Interesting. Skeleton.
Who's been resurrected for some reason. There's not a lot of preamble. You kind of just lift yourself out of a mass of dead bodies and start doing stuff. Helping an old hunter find his dead allies, mess around with chickens until Holy Mother of God! And talk to some creepy shopkeeper who creepily asks you to obtain for him an unholy artifact of immeasurable power. Which is the exact opposite of what I'd say if a skeleton waltzed into my shop. I think I'd sound a little more like this.
Interesting. Skeleton.
Okay, enough messing around. Let's talk about whether or not Skelethrone, the Chronicles of Ericona, is a good Metroidvania.
Combat.
Being a Soulsvania, there's corpse running, baby! But also, combat's pretty simplistic. You have an Estus Flask type healing mechanic that recharges at bonfires. You equip a weapon you have the requisite stats for and press a button to smack shit with said weapon until your stamina depletes. Then you're screwed. You could dodge incoming attacks with your iframes giving rolls, but not without all that stamina you just wasted by smacking shit with your sword. Moral of the story, as is the case with nearly every Souls-like, you gotta be mindful of that stamina bar, especially early in the game when you have next to nothing because you haven't leveled up yet. Mindfulness begins with the HUD. Here, you have your stamina bar in green, as well as your red HP bar and your blue ether bar. Ether's your MP and is used for special abilities that are locked to specific weapons. Think of abilities like Elden Ring's Ashes of War. You like a specific ability? I hope you also like that weapon, because that's the only way you're using that move. Dealing damage in this game is kinda odd. During my 15.5-hour playthrough, I felt like my damage was very underwhelming until the last quarter of the game. Regular enemies always required several hits to take down, and bosses felt like I was chipping away at a brick wall with a butter knife. There are methods to increase your damage that I'll get into during the progression section, but largely damage really depends on your equipped weapon's base damage. I think this game has stat scaling, but if it does, its influence is negligible. My advice is to get the weapon with the biggest numbers. It got me through. Eventually. I say eventually like that because this game is freaking hard. In the end, my death count was 230, and I'd say half of that went to this asshole and his stupid bird. The other half goes to the stupid lady with the stupid purple knife. I don't know what it is about these guys, but they were a nightmare. I think they were just a perfect storm of being a gank fight, along with me still in the phase of the game where I was just not doing a significant amount of damage yet. Regardless, I took him down and spared his life. That surely won't come back and bite me in the ass, right? When it comes to difficulty, if I were to map it out, The bosses in this game would kind of look like they're on a reverse bell curve. They start out pretty difficult, then get far easier about mid-game, then get insanely difficult for a couple of late-game bosses before dropping in difficulty for the last two bosses. I'm not saying those last two bosses aren't hard, but comparatively, they're cake compared to the two bosses that come before them. I don't want to get into the specifics of what makes each boss difficult, but generally, their difficulty comes from what you'd expect from a Souls-like. Bosses hit way too hard, and you do way too little damage. This turns boss fights into a dangerous mix of demanding perfection and being a war of attrition. Another factor that pops up and increases difficulty in the very late game is ether regeneration, or the practical lack thereof. If you recall, you need ether to use your special moves. In the late game, you need to use your special moves if you want to do significant damage or provide yourself needed iframes to hit the more insane bosses. Ether does regenerate, and this regeneration is based off of a stat you can increase, but the regeneration was not very quick and only regenerated on successful hits. And when these late game bosses are near impossible to hit without you also taking a hit, the shortage of ether becomes a real problem. Now, I'd like to add that this game has difficulty settings you can choose prior to starting. Those settings are Exploring, Journey, and Story. Exploring and Journey are the intended difficulty, with Journey giving more hints to players. Story significantly weakens enemies and makes the game much more accessible to people who don't like overly difficult games. So, if all this talk about how difficult the game is turning you away, just know the dev has your back and wants you to have a good time. And that'll do it for combat. It's a Soulsvania. What it lacks in complexity, it makes up for in ludicrous difficulty. The fundamentals here are solid, and thus combat is satisfying. And the bosses, though hard, are very satisfying to vanquish. I do think the game needs some balancing, as I felt my damage output was largely underwhelming during a majority of my playthrough. I don't think I was skimping on any mechanics. Damage, I feel, comes down to your weapon's base damage. And your stats are really just gatekeepers for which weapons you can equip, because scaling, if it existed, didn't seem too impactful. I think some of the late game bosses need some fine tuning. They were just way too difficult. I'd suggest either making it so you aren't always exchanging blows with them, which you will lose in that situation, or make ether regeneration faster. I guess I could parry them, but the parry in this game didn't feel very great to use, so I wasn't about to do that. Also, I never got the bow to work. I could ready my shot, but no button I pressed would loose an arrow. I played on Steam Deck and remapped my buttons, so that might have something to do with it. If you all figured it out, let me know.
Abilities. Platforming.
This section's gonna be pretty light. The abilities in Chronicles are very much abilities you've seen elsewhere. Double jump, grappling hook, and an air dash. I'd recommend spamming this air dash in battle because it costs 0 stamina and gives you iframes. There's literally no downside. There are a couple of other abilities I don't want to spoil that are a little more interesting, but they're still derivations of things you've used before, just with a twist. Overall, abilities are fine in Chronicles. Platforming, on the other hand, is almost non-existent. That's not entirely true. There are a few platforming sections that require you to jump up retracting mushrooms and climb on roots growing from the walls and ceilings. But none of these are difficult, and you're never placed in platforming situation that's gonna tax you too much. Mostly, you'll be running through long hallways and large labyrinthine areas filled with enemies, which is fine because combat is Chronicles' main focus. I just wanted to let you know that you don't really need to worry about platforming too much in this game. There are bottomless pits and traps to navigate, but thankfully, none of these will kill you instantly. There are very few puzzles in the game, and the puzzles that are in it basically revolve around having specific equipment equipped when you do stuff. You'll figure it out. You're all a smart bunch. And I guess that really is it for this section. If you're coming to Skelethrone, it's not for its platforming.
Progression.
Chronicles has your basic Souls-like leveling up system and its own system to spice things up. In Chronicles, you kill enemies for essence and use that essence to level up at bonfires. Sound familiar? You have several stats, each doing their own thing as explained in the leveling menu. Some stats directly affect your HUD bars, while the others mainly affect what weapons you can equip. Most weapons have multiple stat prerequisites, so keep that in mind as you get started. Equipping a weapon you don't have the stats for means swinging that weapon a single time is going to take a huge chunk of your stamina away. Something else to consider is weight capacity. If you become over-encumbered, meaning your equipment load exceeds your weight limit, you lose the ability to jump, which is absolutely devastating in a platformer. So make sure you don't do that. As far as equipment goes, you have your main hand to hold your weapon, your offhand to hold your shield or bow, and slots for a helm, armor, boots, and gloves, with each piece of armor adding to your defense and resistances to elements like lightning, light, and fire. It's everything I want in my equipment. There's also 2 slots for rings, and these rings do all kinds of things from increasing stats to stuff I don't want to spoil, which is exactly the kind of stuff I want in my accessories. Overall, I like the equipment in this game a lot. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it also doesn't need to be. I got exactly what I wanted. It's perfect. Getting back to the game's progression systems, where things get interesting is with its knowledge system. As you roam the land, you'll find green glowing essence shards. These have a dual purpose. First, every 5 shards increases the amount of healing charges you have, so that's big. Also, it's like your Thanos collecting the Infinity Stones, and that's cool. And second, every shard you collect gives you a knowledge point. There's a big old tree in the menu where you use these points to unlock nodes. This tree isn't too exhilarating because you don't gain any skills from it. Mostly, nodes permanently increase stats like HP, stamina, or ether. The most interesting nodes are the weapon nodes that, once unlocked, promise to increase the effectiveness of that weapon type. To what degree that effectiveness is, I have no idea. When it comes to weapon types, there are effectively 3: swords and daggers, two-handers, and blunt. Shields and bows exist, but I don't use shields because I'm a dude, and I just couldn't get the bows to work in this game. There aren't many side quests, though the dev just released another update that says a new quest NPC was added, so thanks for making my video outdated, I guess. From what I played, side quests boiled down to having a quest item and giving it to somebody. Most, if not all, of these quest items must be purchased, so it's not so much a quest as it is doing somebody else's errands. There are exactly 2 shops in the game, and more than 50% of their stock is dedicated to side quest items and main quest items. The other items have to do with rerolling stats, and I just didn't worry about them. It's not like you can make builds in Chronicles. Again, stats were really just gatekeeping weapons. There's also no blacksmiths in the game. That's not a criticism, but I would have liked some way to enhance a weapon I liked because, if you recall, abilities are specific to weapons. So if I liked an ability, but its DPS was trash, I'd be forced to equip a new weapon and thus lose my ability. Very sad indeed. That does it for progression. You got your basic Souls-like leveling system, which I love and always get addicted to, and your basic Souls-like equipment system, which I also love. The knowledge system was pretty limited with 0 skills to pick up from its tree, though collecting the essence shards was a lot of fun, but I'll go over that more in the next section. Stats appeared undercooked and were mostly used as weapon gatekeepers, so creating builds was also pretty limited. And as far as side quests go, just make sure to pay attention to the shopkeepers.
Exploration.
This is what I'm talking about. The exploration in Chronicles is so good. I don't even know where to start. I guess the first thing would be to decide if exploration is rewarding. And yup, very rewarding. Between finding cool new weapons and armor and rings, you can also find those essence shards that increase your healing charges and give you knowledge points in the weirdest of places. Shards can be just out of reach, or hidden behind foreground objects, or dropped by an enemy that you had no idea was even holding a shard, or in this optional boss's stomach that just randomly has different pieces of loot inside. I was always getting surprised by where I'd find these little glowing things. It was awesome. Something else I find personally rewarding in Soulsvanias is just gaining ground. There's something great about always feeling threatened, always being on your toes and needing to overcome adversity. Every inch gained in the map feels earned, and I like that feeling. The biomes themselves, especially the mid to late game biomes, felt rewarding just to look upon. The backgrounds in some of these environments were absolutely incredible. There were so many areas that captured my imagination and kept me motivated to see more of this fascinating world. I can see how people would compare Chronicles' world with Blasphemous's, and I guess that's fair, but man, is there some amazing art going on here. To think that one person thought up and created all of this is mind-blowing. The creativity and talent on display throughout Skelethrone is beyond impressive. I don't want to show too much because I feel I'd be stealing away some of the experience, but you gotta trust me when I say this game's world is captivating. It doesn't happen often when I play Metroidvanias, but Skelethrone had many moments that made me stop and stare in awe. This game has some truly wonderful backdrops. Chronicles even has a biome reveal that absolutely astonished me. Not just in how it looked, but also in where it's located and how its entrance was delivered to the player. I'll reveal what biome that was in the spoilers section. All I'll say about it now is that it was an amazing journey to get there. And just remembering how to get there gives me all the good MV feels. Okay, now that I got some of the good out of the way, let's talk about the stuff that's not so good. The in-game map. It's fine overall, but there were just some things about it that bugged me. First, it doesn't tell you your exact location. Whatever area you're in just blinks. It's not awful, but still a little annoying. What I hated about it were two specific things. One, there's no map button. You have to go into the menu and tab over to the map every single time you want to use it. And with no minimap, this was a huge hassle. And two, you can't place map markers. I'm getting too old for this. Y'all need to start putting map markers in your games if you want me to find all your shit. Alright, back to the good stuff. Fast travel. Loved it. You get it right at the beginning of the game, and you can go between bonfires as you please. You also get this flute that lets you return to bonfires at any time, but it has a devastatingly long cooldown between uses, which I thought was actually kinda cool. There's also these lanterns you can activate along the way. I thought these things were brilliant. Essentially, they're like bonfires, but you can't use them to level up or heal. But if you die, you'll respawn at them like you would any other checkpoint. But the big difference here is that respawning at a lantern doesn't respawn enemies like it would if you respawned or rested at a bonfire. I love this. This game's hard and filled with tough enemies, so these lanterns were a godsend. The worst part about Souls-likes is how dying requires you to re-kill everything you already fought, vastly increasing your chances of dying again and having to restart the cycle. Yes, this happens in traditional MVs too, but traditional MV enemies aren't nearly as difficult as Soulsvania MVs. That's why it feels so impactful in Skelethrone. With these lanterns, you actually feel like you're gaining significant progress with every enemy you kill, because if you die, you'll respawn and they won't. I'm sure there are some people that feel a certain way about this, but I don't care. As I said, I loved it. It kept the game's pacing moving at a good clip, and I just loved having the advantage for once in my Soulsvania life. Stuck in an area with 5 enemies taking you down? Rush in and kill one of them, so the next round you'll only have 4 to deal with. The one downside is when you get really far, kill all the enemies along the way, and then die. Now, you have to retrace your steps through a dozen or so empty hallways, and it's kinda boring. And can I just say, this game's got some bull. There's a biome you can stumble upon very early in the game that's too dark to see anything in. When you enter, your MV senses should go off, telling you to turn around and come back later. That's cool and all. Definitely not something I haven't experienced before in an MV. But did you know this game has a minimum of 3 different light sources you can find to help you through that area? And all 3 are missable? That's incredible. I love that kind of confidence in game design, when devs fully expect players to do their due diligence to find a way to advance forward instead of just giving them a scripted key item handed to them along the critical path. And 2 of these light sources are straight up Dark Souls references. One of these references being absolutely glorious. I'll definitely share it in the spoilers section. And that's a wrap for exploration. To summarize, exploration is rewarding. There's lots of loot to find. At every moment I felt threatened, so even gaining an extra inch on the map felt earned. The environments and biomes looked amazing and captured my imagination with all the intriguing background pieces. I really can't say enough about how much I enjoyed Skelethrone's world. The game's a bit non-linear, but you'll eventually get stopped and have to change course if you're straying too far from the critical path.
Atmosphere. Narrative.
I think I said all that needs to be said about the game's environments in the last section. They are equal parts gorgeous, grotesque, and enthralling. A true achievement in an imagination realized. I also found the game's music to be pretty good. Nothing stuck out in particular, but I felt the music on offer did its job. It sounded epic when it needed to, and somber when it needed to. It was good stuff. The enemy designs were pretty incredible. Nothing here looked generic besides some bats and some tree enemies, but what can you do with bats and trees, right? There was this one big mushroom enemy in the early game that looked so good. Like it was made using claymation like an old Ray Harryhausen movie. I love stuff like that, making enemies look as if they were created in another medium. It really enhances that otherness feeling to them. The boss designs were pretty on point too. I'm not gonna lie, I saw the key art to this game and did not have high hopes on the art's quality. Thankfully, my worries were unfounded. Yes, this game has a kind of Newgrounds flash game aesthetic going on, but I dug it. The narrative, on the other hand, might need a little work. I've completed the game and still don't really know exactly what's going on or why the world is the way it is. I presume the developer isn't a native English speaker, and thus some things might have been lost either in translation or due to poor localization. I think I kind of have a handle on what's going on here, but discussing it will spoil things, so I'll save that for the spoiler section. So what I'll say non-spoilery about the narrative is this. Don't worry too much about it. The game wants to keep you in the dark in the first half, then there's a twist you see coming a mile away, then a really weird revelation happens, and that's when the game lost me and I never recovered. But because I loved the exploration and environment so much, I didn't worry about my narrative confusion. There are 2 endings in the game, and these endings are determined by a choice you make. I personally hate when my MV's endings are determined by a binary choice rather than through exploration and discovery. And because this choice isn't reversible, that means you'll have to play the game twice to achieve both endings. That's also a bummer, but to soften that blow, the game offers boss alternatives based off some of your choices. So, whatever choices you made in your first playthrough, switch it up and see what happens. Alright, it's spoiler time. Go to this timestamp to fast travel to my final thoughts.
Spoilers.
First off, here's that glorious Dark Souls reference I alluded to earlier. Stunning, isn't it? Definite highlight in the game. Not just because it's a great reference, but because it's part of the amazing journey to get to the biome I was geeking out over. Okay, so that biome is called the City of Solar, and the journey to find it is incredible. First off, it's right below the first biome in the game, and I love backtracking to previous biomes to find other hidden biomes. Second, you have to go through the dark biome to find this city, and that's an adventure all its own. Here's what I had to do. I found the biome that was too dark and turned around because I'm not an idiot. Now, I have that dark biome chewing on the back of my mind. Then, I find this worthless iron ring, as it's described in the in-game menu. So, I know it's not worthless. Nice try, 70 Strike. But this isn't my first rodeo. Then, I go through a bunch of tough biomes and tougher bosses, all while the dark biome and that worthless iron ring live rent-free in my head. And then I find our boy Solaire's statue praising the sun. I put together the brother references and boom, I get a ring that emits light in dark areas. Boys, you better believe this is the kind of stuff I live for in my MVs. Everything just clicked. My worthless ring had been traded in for a light source that I can use to finally explore that dark biome from the beginning of the game. You bet your sweet ass I dropped everything and went straight to that dark biome to explore. I earned this. And I could finally scratch that itch gnawing in the back of my skull. So anyway, I get into the dark biome, and of course it's a complete nightmare, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I defeat its stupidly hard boss and all her stupid ads, unlock the gate that's been teasing me the entire time I was exploring this biome, and then this happens. It is an amazing feeling to go through that hell and then be greeted with a hidden underground city bathed in golden light. And the way the game has the player descend upon the city with outstretched wings adds so much to the reveal. The confidence the developer exudes in this moment, allowing player agency at such a pivotal reveal in lieu of a cutscene, is nothing short of brilliant theater. Minor spoilers for Fear and Hunger, so go here to skip a few seconds forward. But for all you out there who've played Fear and Hunger, this reveal is much like discovering Mahabra. Granted, the Mahabra reveal is much more awe-inspiring and intense because, let's be honest, Fear and Hunger is a much more intense game. But you can see how discovering the City of Solar reminded me of that. Also, what's up with the golden light in the City of Solar? Could it be that the sun is actually underground and Solaire was right to go deep underground after all? Again, another awesome Dark Souls homage. Okay, let's talk narrative for a bit. Like I said earlier, I'm completely flummoxed about what's going on. Here's what I'm thinking. About mid-game, you give the Book of Mourners to the creepy shopkeeper, who then betrays you, because of course he does, by throwing you into the Abyss. While in the Abyss, you meet a knight and a bunch of former comrades from different universes. That's right, you learn there's a multiverse and that Ericona, who you presumably are considering that's who you were in the game's prologue, exists in every universe in this multiverse. Sometimes you have a different name, sometimes you're a woman, but in every universe, you're trying to overthrow a king or something. I think it's revealed that you're not the Ericona from the prologue, but actually Ericona from another universe. And this Ericona is named John Decker, because I guess Skelethrone, the Chronicles of John Decker, doesn't have as good a ring. Anyway, you beat the game with the real ending, more on that in a bit, by defeating the creator, whoever that is. The hand from Vampire Hunter D tells you to absorb the creator's essence. You do, and then you wake up as John Decker in a wingback chair beside a cozy fireplace. Decker rambles on about how he's been having dreams about his past lives, which is confusing because I thought they were other universes, but whatever. Then he lifts his hand to show the Vampire Hunter D hand entity is on it, only to have the entity disappear. So, what the hell just happened? Who is the creator? Why did I have to kill him? Why did I want to kill him so badly? Who's Margot's? Here's my big brain take. I think the creator's a scientist from another universe who was searching for immortality. In his search, he found the abyss, or the rift between worlds. In this rift, he saw a world not unlike ours and was shown by the ether a specific soul. I'm guessing this soul is Ericona's and John Decker's, because Ericona and Decker are one and the same, as their souls exist in all universes. I think this special soul of John Decker's is unique, and that it's the only soul that exists in all universes. Thus, that's why the game begins with a bell tolling. It's the creator's bell summoning John Decker's soul to this reality. And when you kill the creator, John Decker's soul returns to his reality, where all this nonsense appears to have only been a dream. And that's all I got. I don't know what the heck is going on in this world. What happened to the world to make it crawling with the undead? Who are the mourners? What is this cult all about? Who are all these bosses I keep killing? No clue. Typically, you discover stuff through dialogue or item descriptions or journal entries or something. Not in Skelethrone. Nothing is given to you. Or if it was too vague for me to understand in a single playthrough. There might have been some exposition given in load screens, but the game loaded so quickly I couldn't read anything. What a strange problem to have. The game loads too quickly. If any of you all know what's happening in this story, please let me know in the comments. I just didn't understand the link between the creator, the blood lady, the cultists, and how they all affected the world so drastically. What the heck even is the Eternal Champion? And why did Sigurd Gall kill the creator? Oh yeah, that's the ending I got because I'm a freaking mook and didn't kill Sigurd when I had the chance. Apparently, being a decent guy who spares his weakened enemies' lives is a bad move in this game. Every time you decide not to kill something, it switches up the bosses. Don't kill the collector, get ready to fight a werewolf in about 10 hours. Why did Diego even turn into a werewolf? Show mercy to the mushroom slaver? Now you have to fight an optional boss that's way harder, especially for the early game. Don't want to kill Sigurd Gall? Now you're locked into the worst ending. Okay, it may not be the worst ending, but it's canonically not the real ending. Also, this ending shows your skeleton breathing. A dark fantasy game full of magic and multiverses not adhering to common logic and physics? I'll not have such a thing in my home. Moral of the story, fuck it. Kill everyone you can in this game. It makes things easier and gives you the real ending, just like in real life. There's also a couple of bosses you defeat and they just run away. It's really odd. Apparently these characters may return in a DLC, so that's something to look forward to, I guess. Last thing I want to talk about is the arena in the abyss. I hated this part, but I always hate the arena part in every video game I play. I think there's a law that requires arena parts in video games to be as boring and tedious as possible. Fight a fight, go do something between fights, rest, fight another fight, repeat a half dozen or more times or until you puke. It especially sucks in Skelethrone because the game's big twist and revelation just happened and you're stuck doing this tedious arena section in a whole new world. For starters, it's tedious and it's also a waste of a new environment. You'd expect to explore this crazy new scenery, but no. Instead, fight a bunch of bosses the dev created and couldn't figure out how to fit into the game organically. I don't know if that's really what happened, but I'd bet money that that's exactly what happened.
Final thoughts and score.
Time stands still.
From the breathtaking environments to the punishing combat, Skelethrone, the Chronicles of Ericona knows how to keep you on your toes. Sure, the narrative might leave you scratching your head, and the leveling up and stat mechanics are a little underutilized, and some of these difficult bosses might have you questioning your life choices. But if you're up for a challenge that rewards perseverance with moments of awe, then this might be the next Soulsvania you check out. Just remember, there are difficulty options, so don't let the game's steep challenge deter you from experiencing the game's amazing vignettes. I award Skelethrone, The Chronicles of Ericona, a 7 out of 10.
Tier placement.
Skelethrone, The Chronicles of Ericona is a good game, a very good Metroidvania, and a decent Soulsvania. It has some underbaked mechanics and lacks some modern conveniences such as map markers, but the polish on this game is impressive, especially because it was done by one person, with some guest help on music and monster designs. There could be a little more polish to tighten things up though. Take a look at this. This window telling me I don't have the stats for a weapon is covering up the weapon's details, which is kind of a big deal because this particular weapon has a special feature that you need to know about to progress in the game. Kind of a shame its description is partially obscured. And like, really, why couldn't I shoot my bow? I have no idea. The creativity in Skelethrone's world also impresses, making exploration its own reward. I just wish the narrative was a little more overt and cohesive so I knew what was actually going on so I could appreciate this world more. And some of the later bosses could have used a little more fine tuning to allow for more openings for attacks. Skelethrone, The Chronicles of Ericona lands comfortably in the B tier. While I may have a few bones to pick with Skelethrone Chronicles of Ericona's character progression mechanics, it's still a spine-tingling adventure worth unearthing for any Metroidvania fan. I ain't adding the boo sound effect. That was 3 puns in a row. I deserve a like and subscribe just for that.